Pielo.
I think like NFTs were the buzzword of 2021, right? And like metaverse was the buzzword of 2022. And it seems like AI is the buzzword of 2023.
If you keep an open mind, a curious mind, and you're always willing to rediscover things, there are great discoveries coming your way.
Hello and welcome to NFTropico, a podcast exploring the intersection between culture and blockchain. Today we have with us Tibor Mérey. Tibor, whose last name I'm surely butchering, is a managing partner at BCBGX, the tech and design division of BCG. I've followed Tibor's content on LinkedIn for a while, and I'm a big fan of the way he approaches these topics, not as a Moonboy maxi hardcore fan, but as someone who's passionate and interested in the opportunities this new tech brings to the table. Again, I hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation as much as I had recording it. And a little heads up, there's an open mint that will last 1 week on an art piece created inspired by this episode.
So Tibor, it's an honor to have you on the show. Like I'm a big fan of your content in LinkedIn. I don't know how we got connected, but I follow you with a genuine interest, and I'm super happy to have you here in the show.
Thanks for having me, Camilo.
Why don't we start by giving us an introduction of what BCBGX is and what's this new super big four consultant arm?
Sure. BCBGX has set out to build the future with our clients. Now, what does this even mean? Many of you might remember BCG as being a strategy consultancy firm being focused on strategy work, transformational work across different industries. With BCBGX, we are now adding build to the equation. We have assembled more than 3,000 engineers, designers, data scientists, data engineers, and venture architects that we can bring to the table to really turn ideas and strategies into reality, building new products or businesses for our clients.
That's amazing, Tibor. And I'm guessing this BCBGX works closely with like new and emerging techs, so AI and metaverse and NFT. That's Web3 at least. That's the interest of this show. How do you guys envision this type of technologies and trends?
You're spot on, Camilo. So we essentially have set out to take these new technologies that are evolving, but then turning them into real impact across businesses. And I think Web3 and Metaverse is not an exception to that. We see really new, exciting technologies out there, but sometimes it can feel like these are new hammers looking for nails. And that is not how you should approach new business. Our mission is to really start from the nail and say, what is the actual business problem that you're solving for your customers or your company? And how can, for example, metaverse technologies or Web3 technologies be a means to an end to drive real impact?
That's super interesting, Tibor, and I'd like to dive deeper. I recently heard, it was on Kylie Riley's podcast, and she said or someone said on the podcast that Web3 and NFT people, it's basically like a bunch of people selling concerts to a concert that doesn't exist, and everyone's just, and it really applies to the hammer and nail metaphor. You like, how do you phrase this from a business standpoint? I think that the space could really serve from that perspective.
Yeah. So let me maybe make it concrete with an example, right? So Web3 has a lot of promise across different types of use cases. I think if you go back to the early days of the blockchain, it was very much centered around cryptocurrencies. It now graduated to other forms of tokenization, be it on the NFT side or also tokenization of physical assets and so on and so forth. Now, one of the promises is that you can rethink the way you engage with your customers if you're, for example, a B2C brand. And one of the emerging early use cases sits in customer loyalty. We are working with increasingly more and more companies that want to accelerate their existing customer loyalty programs with a Web3 component. But you really need to double down and say, what are the real benefits of adding Web3 to it, beyond just creating more headlines in a newspaper that you say, oh, now you can have NFTs with your coffee or whatever it is, right? And I think when you rethink and go back to the source of what are the true benefits of Web3 architectures as opposed to being in Web2, you find a couple of very promising use cases. I'll give you one example. One example is that today, if you're in a loyalty program and you collect points, you essentially can only redeem those points within that loyalty program. Now, some of the bigger loyalty programs, they might have partnerships that you can also use them at some other brands or some other experiences, but it's still very much a closed shop. Now, why is that a problem? Well, if you're a big company, if you're a big airline, obviously you might have enough, ways to redeem those points so that people still think those points are valuable. But if you're a smaller brand or smaller shop, you will never ever get to that critical mass that people truly, embrace that loyalty program. If you tokenize the points or the badges that you can earn, essentially you open it up so that any other type of experience can say, oh, Camilo's coffee shop has offered me points. I can plug in. I can, for example, allow that token to be used at my other brand, and you can create that Web3 ecosystem, just as one of the examples how tokenizing or using Web3 technologies can really unleash power of loyalty, even for smaller brands.
That's super interesting, Tibor. Something that, like, one of the promises that Web3 constantly offers is this notion of shared economies, and I think that there's also like incentives being aligned, and I think that's super interesting. But I've yet to see like the real use cases, because of we know the theory, and everyone I know is watching like what Starbucks is doing, and like but yeah, I think there are some pretty obvious use cases, ticketing and loyalty, but I've still to actually like use them and see them. And maybe it's because I'm in Colombia and like this is our end of the world, but like I don't know if in Europe, like people are actually using the tech. Like, have you actually encountered NFTs in the wild, as one can say?
Yeah, so I mean, I if I'm honest, I mean, my use of NFTs is still very much focused on the traditional means that you have tokenization of digital art or digital work. I did buy one of those Nike CryptoPunks kind of Crypto Kicks shoes. Still waiting for them to be shipped. We see increasingly more and more of these. I think where I'm really excited about is at the interconnection of Web 2 and Web 3, or of the physical world and Web 3. And you might have followed, you have now more and more of these Web 2 platforms, like for example Salesforce, that start integrating Web 3 technology in them. And I think that those are the big on-ramps for traditional brands to start exploring that space. Where I also see very nice applications is in the form of token gating, where you say that you can connect your wallet. I think we have now great advancements with on wallet technology, which makes it more and more easy, even with an email magic link, to spin up a wallet, so that people can start experiencing the power of having their credentials being used for events or for new product experiences. I think it's still early days. I think today it is still paradoxically a walled garden where you do that. So you might have a single event where for that event you might get an NFT and you can use it at that event. But I do believe that we will see more and more interconnected experiences where the one and the same token opens up experiences across different brands.
That's interesting, Tibor. And since you're constantly talking to clients and corporations, and like what's their perspective on Web3? I have the sense that corporations, or at least some corporations, are like, okay, this sounds interesting, I'm gonna wait a bit to see how it plays out. But I don't know, what's your experience with sitting with clients and
Well, so I mean, I have a bit of a biased sample because once people are talking to us or even paying us for proper transformations, those are with already have made up their mind that they want to do something. So that's a bit of a biased view. But having said this, I would say I would probably say there are three buckets of companies and how they approach this. So I think this is a bit in line with how the Web3 and the crypto space has evolved, is obviously in the financial services part. I think there we are really seeing, in my view, mass adoption. I think no bank on this world can kind of allow to ignore the space of decentralized finance and crypto. I think consumers are increasingly demanding that there is an option to hold crypto tokens and to go into maybe even more sophisticated ways of decentralized finance. So there we see that kind of mass adoption already happening. Not every bank does the same. I think there is still a lot of risk associated to it, that people don't want to lose their hard-earned money, and you need to be, well educated about the risks as well. But that's one part of the equation. Now, if I move away from the banking sector and go into the broader industry, I think there are another two types of companies. One is thinking about how can I use Web3 to drive new type of business and experiences. And the other part thinks about how to infuse your current business with certain benefits of Web3. Now, one of the examples I can speak publicly about is in the first group. How can you use Web3 to drive new businesses? Is actually a venture we built with BCBGX for Art Basel called RQL.art. RQL.art, and the listeners can look that up, is essentially setting out to become the Shopify of the Web3 art world. It allows any kind of gallery or art dealer to attach a proof of authenticity token next to the physical artwork that is being sold. So you are now using the benefits of Web3, having that proof on chain, having the possibility to also add in certain royalty parameters attached to the physical art world, and bringing that decentralized creator economy, how you also mentioned it, into the physical art world. So that is one of the areas where they have set out to say this is a new space. We want to build a separate venture, and we have built that end to end, from the product to the team to the actual venture itself.
That's really
an example maybe on how to infuse your current businesses. I think there is one example around loyalty. I think here we see increasingly customers reaching out to us to say, how can I drive more engagement with my customer base? How can I maybe also reach new customers in the generation Z and alpha space? But also anywhere where you have, for example, a topic of decentralized multiple parties that need to have a certain, let's say, form of pricing or marketplace, you can infuse that. So I see, for example, telco operators that use Web3 technology for roaming agreements, where you say you have between different telco operators, you have those international billing agreements, or you also have certain companies that, for example, have performance-based pricing, where you say, I get paid on the actual consumption of my services and not on the volume of the number of products. These are these type of areas where I need to have trust between different parties, and that trust can very well be done on the chain.
You raise an important point, Tibor, that I really have never thought before, like this concept of interoperability. I think it's kind of infused in the Web3 mental model, but I hadn't seen it so laid out as a business case before, and it really is amazing. Like, there's something interesting there. And on that note, I wanted to ask you, like, because I think over and over there's this constant, like, we need to onboard 100 million people and 100 million people and whatnot. But I sometimes think, like, okay, maybe what if that's not necessarily the case, but like there's something to be said about like generating value from within the same network. And like when you think, okay, maybe I don't need to onboard 100 people, but I need to, let's say Colombia, right? I don't need to use a business case for people in Colombia, but rather I need to build a business case for people on the Ethereum blockchain or the Tesla blockchain or whatever it may be. Does that make sense for you?
Yeah, and I think you're also touching a very important point. Web3 does not know any borders.
Right.
If I put something on Ethereum, technically anybody on the planet can access that token, can buy that token, can buy maybe an NFT and so on and so forth. Now, that's the beauty of it, but it's also one of the big issues of it, because if I'm a company today, and I have had discussions with clients on this, and I want to, for example, launch an NFT that I sell that is maybe something attached to a physical product, the issue is that as a corporation, I still need to follow national law. And if I just go into simple things like, what about a value-added tax? Value-added taxes are different by each country, or even within different states within a country. Now, do you need to pay value-added tax when buying an NFT? Do you need to pay value-added tax if you buy like a digital asset? How do you account for that? How can you also, make sure, for example, you don't have any kind of money laundering part? So this is where it gets tricky, because from a technical point of view, it would be super easy to just launch a use case, open, on Ethereum, anybody with a wallet can buy it. But then you run into real legal discussions to say, how does that compare nation state by nation state? So this is, I think, some of the growing pains we see today as companies are embarking on this. But fundamentally, once the value add of a use case outweighs all of that friction around legal, around technical, and so on and so forth, these use cases will start taking off on their own.
That's super interesting. And that leads conveniently to a very obvious point in this conversation, and it's regulations and regulators, right? Like you're in Europe, and like I'm under the impression that the EU has like some very open plans to regulate around crypto and AI, and like, is that the case? Like, how does it feel from the inside?
I think you need to de-average that. So AI is interestingly has been regulated for quite some time in the EU. People are maybe forgetting that, and it's getting more and more hype now. But there is already a lot of regulation in place. It might get a refresh now with a lot of the generative AI stuff that is happening. I think on crypto as well, we do see regulation coming in. And one thing I want to share with the audience is that regulation is not a bad thing. Regulation is actually a good thing, because the worst thing for companies is not if something is regulated or unregulated. The worst thing is if it's not clear. And if it's not clear, and if it's unclear where it goes, because companies need stability. And so I actually see this as a positive sign that we have regulation coming into more and more of these areas, because it gives companies then the safety to say there are certain rules to play by, and then I can also start playing by those rules and creating businesses out of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. As I think most, let's say, Web3 people are looking forward to like a clear set of rules so everyone can participate of the ecosystem. On this conversation of regulation, I think it's interesting to have your opinion on like what's the current state of affairs. Let's say the states being so harsh on crypto and like driving Web3 enterprises elsewhere, Hong Kong being super friendly. Like what does this like landmark or look for you? Like how are you approaching this geopolitical stance?
Yeah. So what I find interesting is if I would look a bit back, I think we obviously have started this like the wild west, and in many parts of Web3 it is still a wild west. But I think with also some of the scandals that have happened in the past 12 months, around FTC, around some of the other scandals, Terra and so on and so forth, I think that was actually a good thing for the space, because it actually drove people back to more reputable exchanges. It has also led to innovation in the space. And what is actually interesting, I am originally from Switzerland, kind of the home country, interestingly, of banking, so to speak. as well as of the Crypto Valley. I was actually born in Zug, which is considered the Crypto Valley in Switzerland, where also Vitalik has driven a lot of the innovation on Ethereum. And what is interesting is that we in Switzerland, if I just take an example, we have now a bunch of crypto banks which actually are regulated. So you have crypto banks which have a banking license, which are regulated according to Swiss law. And those players see now actually a huge influx of people taking their wallets and taking their cryptocurrencies there, because suddenly there is again a value to say, it is not just about the cheapest transaction fees or whatever. I actually want to feel safe when I have my even my digital money and my cryptocurrency somewhere. And so I think that is now something which we will see happening, that trust will become more and more important. I also think that the notion that every one of us has like a non-custodial wallet on MetaMask or wherever, I don't think that's going to be the future. I think we will have a mix between self-custodial wallets and custodial wallets, which are being held by entities that you also trust today. And those entities could be your banks, those entities could maybe be your telco operators, or other entities who you trust day in, day out with your current money, with your current relationships. And you will extend that trust and also to crypto services and assets that are being held in wallets supported by them.
It's pretty cool. Yesterday, I was hearing a podcast with Ian Rogers, who's part of the Ledger team, and he was talking about security as a flex, which is a really fun and interesting concept I hadn't thought about before. That's interesting. Tibor, and we mentioned AI and I wanted to have your point on, because I think like NFTs were the buzzword of 2021, right? And like metaverse was the buzzword of 2022, and it seems like AI is the buzzword of 2023. And like, how do these are these passing ideas or trends, or like how do you envision all these technology trends from at BCG?
Yeah, no, and that's kind of a question I get asked in any kind of conversation I'm today is, is it now all over with the Web3 hype or with the metaverse hype, and is it now all of AI? And I actually need to paraphrase Neil Stephenson on this one. Neil Stephenson, as the author of Snow Crash, and he's actually also quite active in Web3 if you have followed. I mean, he's one of the brains behind Lamina 1 and new Layer 1 blockchain. And so what he said when he was asked by the Financial Times earlier this year, if now AI has taken the spotlight and if the hype around metaverse is all over, he said the following. He said, the fundamental point is that the speed of hype is always faster than the speed of engineering. And any engineer in the crowd here will understand this. Engineering is hard. Engineering takes time, but engineering progresses. And what you achieve today will be the basis on top of which you can build tomorrow. And anybody in the space, be it on the Web3 side or the metaverse side, knows that this is happening. We had a lot of, debate on all of kind of wallets that is, it's a bad technology. It's not user friendly. Hey, now we have self-custodial wallets. Suddenly it becomes better and better. We had the issues of transactions per second, high gas fees, and so on and so forth. Hey, guess what? That is also being worked on. So this is, something which we see progressing. And the hype, goes up and it dies down, but engineering will progress.
That's beautiful. I always use the phrase of technology like it's overrated in the short term, but it's underrated on the long term. Always. That's fantastic. I'm gonna quote Neil on that for sure.
You can quote me quoting Neil, exactly.
Yeah, that's good. Tibor, and I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't ask a business person about like the meme coin mania, and like what's your take on like this new trend of Web3?
Well, I mean, I am somewhat of a meme lord myself, but But what I find interesting again is you always need to look behind the curtain on this. And I think what you understand is, if you look behind the curtain, is that there are fundamental human needs that just exist. People like to get entertained. People like to form communities of being like-minded about something, and that has value. And now with Web3, we have a means to unleash that community. Yeah. And so what I also keep telling people is, Web3 or an NFT does not create a community. Yeah, it actually taps into existing communities and gives them a new means, or a new hammer, so to speak, for their nail. And that's why these things take off, because you can suddenly truly participate in a common interest that was before unable to be, monetized or to be shared in such a form and matter.
Yeah, it's amazing. I like that idea. I also think like meme coins are one of those use cases where like the technology is at the same level as the hype. So you can actually, it takes a couple of minutes to set up the Tibor coin and see it rise or something. So yeah, that's fun. Tibor, and like when you speak to people, like, okay, so I want to dive deeper in this Web3 spirit. Like I want to understand it better. Like where do you point them, or like how do you tell them to approach the space?
Yeah. So I would say there are definitely three things they can do. One is get informed. And I'm happy also to share my personal reading list on anything Web3 related, where I also tap into. But this space is evolving so fast that you need to constantly get up to speed. You need to read, you need to maybe follow the right people, because if you are thinking about a use case or technology that is not ready today, hey, maybe in 3 months or in 6 months, it is certainly going to be ready. So it is really something that you need to stay informed. I think the second part is to really join communities. Yeah, I think there are plenty of Discord communities, and sometimes even buying an NFT can bring you into such a community. So that brings me also to the third point, which is you should try it out. It is all just something where it's not enough to just read about it or to listen to some podcasts. It's a good start, but you should get your hands dirty, and anybody can do that. Anybody can buy an NFT or a meme coin or whatever it is. Maybe you don't need to spend your life savings on it, but hey, pick out an NFT collection that you find interesting, join the Discord channel, get engaged in the community, and you will really experience the power of Web3. You can also, try out other parts. You can invest a bit in crypto, and it's again not about necessarily making money right off of it, but really get acquainted of how does it work, what does it mean to open up a wallet, what does it mean to have different types of coins, how does connecting wallets to other experiences work. I think that is really a very interesting part of the journey, and we're only at the beginning of it.
Yeah, that's I always use the same, buy an NFT and like suffer the floor prices ups and downs and like the Discord groups, and like it's quite an experience for sure. Tibor, and like I'd like to close or at least close the conversation on the note of like, how do you see the future of Web3 and NFTs?
So I think what we will start seeing, and I think that has been said elsewhere as well, is I think we will now actually start hearing less and less about those terms, simply because it will become baked into experiences. I think nobody really cares or knows if a certain website you visit is running on HTML5 or PHP or whatever, it's the underlying framework. It just runs and you enjoy the content and the experience on the website. I think that's going to start happening with, for example, NFTs. It's no longer being called NFT. It's just, you get a coupon or you get a token or a badge, and that might run on Web3, blockchain technology in the back end. And so I think that is what we will start seeing. We will see the benefits of it, because suddenly you can You can connect to different experiences, or the way how we, for example, in the future will get our university diploma will be technically a credential that is either on-chain or is a very valuable credential. And it will just make our lives easier because it will take out middlemen, it will take out a lot of friction out of these processes.
It's good. Yeah, I think that's the main spirit within like the ecosystem. Like, yeah, no longer will we hear the word or concept NFTs. And I'd really like to close on art. That's something that I'm very passionate about. I think digital art it's due for a renaissance. And I wanted to have your take on what's happening there, and also like share some alpha on what artists are you following and who do you think are doing interesting stuff in the space.
So I must admit, I mean, I do enjoy art. I am not a big art professional in that sense. So there are definitely others deeper on that end. I mean, I do think that now the whole generative AI hype has fueled this a lot. I think what this means is that it is on one side democratizing art even more. I think anybody who has a bit of creativity can now use these tools to create digital art themselves and get into the space. I think that is a good thing, yeah. But on the other thing, once you are tipping a bit deeper into it, you will actually then suddenly realize that it does make a huge difference if a proper artist is generating the prompt as opposed to anybody. And that I think, again, brings back the relevance to true digital artists. And maybe art or digital art is now taking just the next step. You know, before maybe some of the traditionalists were arguing if you are not holding an actual, if you're not actually painting physically with colors on a piece of cloth or whatever it is, but you're doing it using digital tools, like Illustrator or Photoshop or whatever it is, it's no longer considered art. Some might now argue if you're not even using that, but you're just using a prompt with Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or whatever it is, that is no longer art. I think it's just happening to go on the next level, right? And so I think having the creativity as well as the craftsmanship to craft prompts in a way, or using a kind of the mix between generative AI and still human touch, that will become the next renaissance of digital art. So I'm generally curious. I'm not a big art aficionado myself. I wish I had more time to get into that, but I am generally positive about the outlook, how now humans and AI work together also in this domain.
I think that's a commentary about technology in general, right? Like the fact
it's true.
that there are means to do stuff doesn't mean like, yeah, well, I mean, everyone can take a picture, but not all pictures are beautiful, right? Or
yes,
everything. So yeah, that's a really nice thought. Tibor, I don't know if there's anything you feel you wanna talk over or we didn't go through.
I mean, I think the one thought I want to leave listeners behind is really stay curious, stay open and stay curious, because whatever you think is not there yet today, it might already be there in 6 months' time. So if you keep an open mind, a curious mind, and you're always willing to rediscover things, there are great discoveries coming your way.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Tibor. I was really looking forward to this conversation and I really enjoyed it. So it's really a pleasure, and I hope you'll be back someday when all these new discoveries are made.
Thank you so much.
Hielo.